So where were we?
Hebrews chapter 3, I think.
Close. 4.
4. Yeah.
Hebrews chapter 4. So we'll be on 5 today, but as always, we'll run through 4 really quick. And they're both pretty short today. But let us therefore fear. What are we supposed to be afraid of?
The Lord.
That's pretty much the only thing, right? Why should we be afraid of the Lord or God?
It's the beginning of wisdom.
Right. It is the beginning of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. But ultimately, why be afraid of God? Because if you don't do what He says, you go burn forever.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good reason, I would think, right? So, lest a promise being left us of entering into His rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. You want to enter into God's rest because the alternative is not something you're going to like, and it never ends. So, for unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them, talking about present-day Hebrews, past-day Hebrews. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. So they got preached to, the Hebrews of the time, just like the Hebrews of the past got preached to, but the difference is they didn't believe it. So what happens if you hear something and you don't believe it? What happens when you watch the news and you don't believe it? It kind of has no effect on you, no power on you. So in some cases, that's a really good thing. You shouldn't listen to stuff or believe things, so it doesn't have the effect on you. But in this case, and has been shown all throughout their history in the Hebrews, that's why I'm stressing it here, it's important to believe it this time. It's important to believe all of that, because the reason that they didn't get it, and the reason why bad things kept happening to them over and over and over, is because they heard it and did not mix it with faith. They didn't believe it. They didn't listen to it. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as He said, as I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. So God He made the earth, the universe in 6 days, and then He rested. That was the point to come with Him to His rest. That doesn't mean God's necessarily not doing things, not working, but He's not building planets still. There's nothing new coming up, nothing old coming up that hasn't been. That's where all that stuff kind of falls into play. But that's where He wants us to go with Him. For He spake in a certain place of the seventh day, which is kind of what I was just talking about, on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all His works. So come with Him to the rest that He started on the seventh day. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest, seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, obviously, He wouldn't have rested if it was not complete for people to come enter in. You don't have to build a house with no windows, doors, or anything, and then have I just built my house party. So it's not done yet. So He finished it first, that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief. But in order to get an invitation to this house party, you have to believe, and in order to believe, you have to give me your address. So think of it like that. If I don't believe and send you my address, then I'm not going to get a letter invite me to this party. Same with God. He's going to ask you to believe. You're going to hear it. You're going to believe. Do you believe it or not? They did not. They didn't get to enter in. Again, He limited a certain day, saying in David, today. Not today, today. That just means of a presumed compound of the article, blah, blah, on the day. Generally now, hitherto, this day. So it could mean today, like you're hearing now, or on the day, or up to the day. So if I say to date now, like to date, meaning everything up until this point, we have yet to do that. That's more of what they're saying in this sense. So, and I'll tell you why it's not today here in a second. Saying in David, today after so long a time. So to date after so long a time. As it is said, today if you will hear His voice, harden not your hearts. For if Jesus had given them rest, then would He not have afterward have spoken of another day. So if Jesus meant today, like right now, today, harden not your hearts and enter into the rest, then what would we be doing here? It'd be over. Everybody would already be into the rest, and we would be left out chilling on the outskirts. So it's not today, although it is today, just up to date for that. It's pretty confusing. I had to go to the Greek and look at that up a little bit. But there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. So you do enter into a rest, so to speak, and you will at one day, but for he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Have we ceased from our works? You hear it from every TV preacher and prophet preacher ever. And now I'm going to use it. No, God's not done with us. We still have a work to do, right? So we have not yet entered into his rest, as what this is speaking of. Let us labor, therefore, to enter into that rest. So let's keep working, keep going on, so that we do get into it, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. If you keep working for a goal, you keep studying towards a goal, believing, looking towards, the easier it is to keep following it and keep going towards it. So if you just kind of fall off, backslide, so to speak, eventually you can come to the point where you question a lot of the things. So you might be like, well, I know God's real, but he probably doesn't heal anymore. I know God's real, but we're probably not made in his image. I know God's real, and you just slowly start stepping down to where you're just like, yeah, I don't even know about the God thing anymore. But if you stay at the forefront of it, you keep going and keep praying, keep working, keep doing the things, and you're going to see it, then you're going to know. And that's to help you with your unbelief. For the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, and of the joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. What's the difference between soul and spirit?
Spiritual life is your mind, will, and emotions.
I think I did this one before a long time ago, but I kind of forgotten. So soul comes from psyche. That's where we get psyche from. And it's thus distinguished on the one hand from... Alright, so this one's thinking of it as breath. So the soul is your breath. It's what makes you alive. Like if I didn't have breath, I would be a meat, really. That's what they call it. Just like meat and bones. Nothing really special about it anymore. There's no life in it. So this is more so the life force. And then spirit is pneuma. And that is more talking about the rational spirit. The power by which a human being feels, thinks, wills, decides. That's your soul. So psyche is what makes you alive. And the soul and the spirit is what... That's a good way to explain this. One is the breath of life. The other is your... Personality. Yeah, I don't want to say like you're the free will part because this breath part. But one, you're alive. You can be breathing and not necessarily alive. If that makes sense. But one that actually makes you alive, that's your spirit. If a horse can be breathing and have a soul, but one that's out running and jumping fences and going crazy, but wow, that one has a lot of spirit, so to speak. There you go. That's a better way to explain it. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. He sees everything. You can't really hide from God. Seeing then that we have a great high priest, pay attention to that word, high priest, that's what the next one's about, that is passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. So why would they think, or why would it be important that Jesus is a high priest? Just be thinking about it. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities. He's felt what we felt before. He knows what we're going through because he came down in the flesh and went through it himself so that he could be a better leader for it. It could be a better high priest. But was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly into the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. So that's why Jesus came down here. to go through what we went through to show us that it is possible. Obviously, we're not going to be as perfect as him, but anyway, so picking right up on that. For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. So why did they have high priests? Why was he a high priest, not just a priest? Somebody had to be at the top of the line. So when you think high priest, you're thinking like the really, really up theirs. So like Moses, I don't know that Moses was necessarily a high priest. He was more the prophet status, the guy making more of a king status, if you look at it. But his brother Aaron was a high priest, who also was like, oh, let's worship cows for a little bit. But, they had to pick somebody for this. So a high priest. And they had specific the rules and different things they did. They all wore the breastplate with the jewels, the crowns. They had the little bells and stuff down there. Just they're supposedly like the holiest of the holy. The people that are closest to God, they probably lived in the temple and probably did all that. We don't really have that in our section of Christianity, I guess. Like, Catholics are all about this stuff. They got like each jewel would mean a different rank there. The Orthodox have it, popes and all that. We don't really, who's our guy? That's why this one's tough to explain. But he was the guy who made the sacrifices for you. You'd bring him your sheep and stuff. He would kill them for you and offer them to God for you for your sins. Who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. Who can have compassion on the ignorant? That eliminates me from being a high priest right there. I'm always like, no, stupid. I have compassion on. But yeah, that's why you need those people who've been around, who know the super holy people to keep close. And by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, he also for himself to offer for sins. So he's the guy that makes and offers sacrifices for sins. He's the one who helps the most. He's kind of what you would imagine the Pope should be, but just isn't. It's not very good. And no man taketh his honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. Told you Aaron was a high priest. So also Christ glorified not himself to be made an high priest. Again, he was more like call him the king. Jesus Christ is king, right? So he was more of a king status, which is a little bit above a high priest, but high priest was very honorful, very honor bound. So also Christ glorified not himself to be a high priest, but he that said unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. So he's like, I could be a high priest or the son of God. Which one are you going to pick? As he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. You remember that guy? We did a bunch of stuff on him. So for one, his bloodline was already ordained from Abraham to be forever a priest, a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. That was a little bit different than the Levites and Aaron and all those. But it goes on. Who in the days of his flesh, alright, this part was confusing, I had to read it a whole bunch. As he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. But who is he talking about here? Jesus, right? He's still talking about Jesus right here. He didn't switch to talking about Melchizedek. That was worded a little weird. Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications and with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared, even Jesus fears God, obviously. The Son will fear the Father, they know. Thought he were a son, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. So he had to suffer to even learn obedience unto God. It's kind of weird, right? That God had to learn obedience through God. That's what it's talking about through here. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. So that is how he got his I guess, supreme, it's a good word for this, supreme divination next to God. I'm not saying he wasn't there with God for the whole time, but he definitely didn't just come down and come right back up in the same status as he was before he left heaven. He went on a very hard mission, pulled it off, came back up with God. I'll have to biblically research that a little bit, but that's kind of what it's saying right here. And it's what it's been saying through all Hebrews. He kind of came down, proved himself, Christ did, and went up better than he was before coming down. Like now he's the one that proved it. And Revelation says some things about now he's the only one worthy to open it, even though all the other ones have been in heaven from the beginning of time with God, all the other beasts. But don't quote me on all that yet. That's a Thursday topic maybe. Called of God and high priest after the order of Melchizedek, of whom we have many things to say. Again, still not talking about Melchizedek, talking about Jesus still. Of whom we have many things to say, and hard to be uttered, seeing ye are dull of hearing. They're probably not paying attention and not doing stuff. They don't want to hear it. Oh, Melchizedek, we're only following Levi and Aaron and blah, blah, blah. Well, too bad. For the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God. What are those first principles? And are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. What's the difference between needing milk and meat? Everybody gets the whole milk and meat concept, right?
Yeah, baby Christian.
Yeah. You don't give a newborn a big steak to make it grow because it can't chew it, can't eat it. And adults, if you go work out all day, you can drink a glass of milk and it's fine. It's probably good for you, but it's not as good as a big steak is laying there for you to make you bigger and all that. But they both are very important into this. But the first sentence gets me there. For the time ye ought to be teachers. Some people have gone to church their whole lives and don't know anything about the Bible hardly. How on earth is that possible?
That's right.
I mean, I get you don't have to be an expert. Some people aren't like the expert in biblical stuff, but know who Jesus' brothers were. Know like some of the different things. So, same here. They were priests in the temple. They were all these different people. And he would come back like, look, I would try to tell you about the order of Melchizedek and the oracles and why Jesus came down through it and how he connects all of it. But I'd have to re-explain all of that for you guys to get it. And I don't understand why, because you should be the one teaching this, and this should fall in the line and make sense. But instead, here we are starting over, and I'm taking you all the way back to Abraham. For everyone that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. We get that. You see that a lot. You see some strong opposition arguments, like very, very difficult questions that maybe an atheist or other religions will ask. And then you see the Christian just be like, look, you just got to believe in Jesus and get saved. It's a milk answer. You're not. They're going to be like, yeah, well, all right, cool, dude, leave me alone. You got to have some stuff to fight back with. And it's hard. That is very hard. I get it. It's a very difficult thing to do. Especially with atheists, because they don't believe anyway. So, like, wasting your time 90% of the time. But maybe there's some seeds getting thrown in there. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So discerning good and evil, a lot of that's really not that difficult, right? You know what's good, you know what's evil. Discernment I've said it before, it's not necessarily knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. Right and almost right. That's a discernment. And that was Hebrews 5. We'll be on 6 next week.
Yay!
Short and sweet today.
Very good.